Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining our May webinar. I think we've got a packed schedule for you today, so we're going to jump right into it. Now, for those of you watching for the first time, again, we're going to cover some topics today, but do sign up for a 30-day free trial if you haven't tried the platform before, if you're interested in what you see today. Today's webinar, we're going to cover off a couple different topics. We're going to start off with a really easy one on how to illustrate joint life. So we do get this question a fair bit. Can you illustrate joint life? How is it structured? And how do you do that in life design analysis? So we're going to quickly cover how to illustrate joint life in LDA. And then we're going to move on to how to mark a policy as sold and save renewal information. And this is something I think is going to be critical going forward. We're seeing this trend of Term 10 policies turning into YRT policies. And it makes it very challenging to review them in the future. So when they get to, sort of that 7-year mark from today's date, or, we sell a new policy, how do we review that in the future? And, if renewals are a challenge right now, even in the insurance industry, in some cases, clients have 3 or 4 of them. How's that going to look when they have 8 to 10 to 30 different data points for those renewals? We're going to move on to an advisor highlight. So we've got Ryan King on the agenda today. He's going to remote in from Calgary and show us, a little of how he uses LDA and sort of his day-to-day workflow. So we'll get an idea around that. And then we're going to kind of close off with all about account settings. We've added a lot of different new features in the software over the last few months and over the past year. And if you've been using our platform for, maybe 1 or 2 years, we actually just celebrated our 5th birthday. So, we have some users who have been using the platform for about 5 years now. Now, as things change and as things update, we add new features, but we also like to add new controls and preferences around those features. So I just want to end and wrap up the webinar by just kind of touching base on the basics on our account settings. Make sure you have the best user experience. Make sure you're not constantly, checking off certain boxes and changing certain variables that you could default in there and further increase that efficiency. And then we're going to close with some housekeeping and updates. So without further ado, let's jump into how to illustrate joint life. So I'm going to jump over here to Life Design Analysis, and as I mentioned, if you haven't done so already, do sign up free. There's a 30-day free trial with no credit card on sign up. So you get to try it first, see if it's for you, and then choose between a monthly or annually package. We do have different packages and even different discounts available depending on your MGA, and if you're a Life Guide subscriber, of course, eligible for that exclusive discount of half off. Ask us for details. Essentially, it's just entering your Life Guide serial number as your discount code. Now, I'm going to go ahead and log into my account. Remember, LDA is a web-based platform, so this is something you can log into from anywhere. Now, once you log in, you're going to be taken to the main dashboard here where you can execute all of the different functions of the site. But what I'm going to show you today is basically how to set up a joint life case. And in joint life cases, I still recommend all the sort of the same principles that we would traditionally set up a case. We're just, of course, using 2 clients. Now, in our system, we start with the first client. So we start with a single client here. You can pick either one. Could be the male, the female, could be 2 males if it's a buy-sell or something like that. But I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pick my sample client, who I like to do a lot of my demo work on in my account. And I'm going to say continue here. Now, when we have a single client, we'll see all the details for this client along the right-hand side. Of course, we can go through and add individual plans for this client. But if we wanted to do, let's say a term comparison versus a universal life comparison for this client, but we want to use joint rates, well, what we have to do is then add a secondary client to this. So what we're going to do is, if you notice along, we've got our first client here. And even things like, our first client's information, like, client age override for the singular client. Well, what we're going to do is we're actually going to say add joint client. And you can see it brings up a very familiar box where we would either select an existing client or perhaps, even maybe add a new client right from the screen. And that's what I'm going to do right here. I'm just going to show you that I could add even a brand new client. So I could say this is Jenny, client. And again, I'm going to give Jenny a birth date here. I'm going to say Jenny is born in 1977. I'll just say May 4th. May the 4th be with her. And I'll save her as a female. Again, you can enter in all of the additional occupation and employer annual income. It's not required. That's more for the CRM component or that client management component. Again, if you think about using our system as a web-based access, you'll have information on your clients accessible wherever you go. So again, the more information you enter here, like phone numbers, the easier it is to look up your clients and actually connect with them if you are on the road. For the sake of brevity and the sake of this demo, I'm just going to enter this client, and you can see again, just like when we generate a regular client, as soon as we create this client and hit save, that contact record is saved forever. So we never have to re-enter Jenny here. We're going to start receiving things like those birthday notifications for Jenny as well. Now, again, we might want to give this one a particular case name, or and give it a tag and just say this one's joint. So we could add that in there as the case name. Again, this could be a case title. So maybe one presentation is joint life, maybe another is single, and even think about comparing things like two individual policies versus a joint life. A lot of times we look at joint first to die, but if we actually run the numbers, a really good comparison is a joint policy versus two individual coverages. And yes, two individual coverages are going to be more money, but we're going to have twice as much benefit. So a lot of times that makes a good comparison. In this one, I'm going to stick to something pretty simple. So one of the things you'll notice that when I added Jenny, our secondary client, there were a few changes in the controls. So we can see Jenny here is 41 because of the date that we've entered, and our sample client's 50, age nearest 51. Now, if we wanted to backdate any of these clients, again, we could make our original client 50, and we could forward date or backdate. I'm going to leave Jenny as is, but this is again, you get two controls for both clients. You can also see the policy buttons changed a little bit. As soon as we added that second joint client, it recognized that we wanted to do some form of joint search. So I'll just give you an idea here. If I put in $1 million for my insurance benefit, of course, any sort of face value would work, but I like to, pick something, fairly sizable, but fairly average as well. I'm going to select the term button. So I'm going to say, okay, we want to search for some term product. And again, we're going to see our particular client. So we backdated our male to 50, and we kept Jenny here at age 41. So you can see both of kind of the tombstone information for our client. Now, just like any sort of survey that we would do in Life Design Analysis, this is provided to us through that LifeGuide connection. So remember, again, LifeGuide subscribers get that discount to the software. And again, you have access to all of that information in our platform here. So I'm going to start off. I'll pick a term 10 here. And again, you can see there's a different type of quote. So you have joint first to die, joint last to die, first death, and joint last to die, second to death. Now, I'm just going to pick a joint first to die. I find this is maybe one of the more popular ones. And again, I'm just going to say all companies out there. I'm not going to stick to my preferred companies, but of course, you can search an individual one or all. And again, I'm going to hit search. And this is the same process you would do, for a lot of the products that you're adding into Life Design Analysis to compare. So again, we can go down the list and see all of our different carriers and how they rank in the survey, how their percentage difference is. And again, you can select any one of these different companies. I'll pick Equitable Life Term 10 as an example. I know they've got great conversion options, and I might want to illustrate that later. Now, again, I can compare this to any other product type. So the same way I would, add in a policy, again, I can do a Term 10 to maybe a min-funded UL. And again, same sort of thing. I want to keep this apples to apples. So again, I'm going to do joint first to die. I'm just going to say all companies and perform the survey. And again, I can go through this survey and say, who do I like out of this? You can see Equitable again comes out at the top here. So that makes nice consistency. I'll just add them to the case. But that's really as easy as joint life is. Again, we can, of course, go ahead and generate a report and take a look at, sort of the phenomenal report that is presented. But just as we would present for one client, now we've got, both client names on the report. We've got both of our product types down here, so we can see, our Term 10, initially affordable, increases in rates and gets very, very expensive as we age. Versus, say, something minimum funded, like a UL policy, again. So initially more expensive for the first 10 years. But again, even thinking about, at 60, are these people going to be healthy enough to reapply? And again, at 70 again. And I like this idea, the funny saying that my stepfather would always say, and I reference quite a bit, is, term is like a diaper. And at some point, you'll have to change it. Now, again, you could always illustrate, sort of the concept of even a rewrite on that kind of thing as well. So again, if we were to do a Term 10 search here, I've got joint second to die. If you ever make a mistake on that, again, go just up. You can just scroll up and I can change that to joint first to die again and modify that result. So again, it's really easy to go back and forth. And again, this is somewhere you might also want to add in something like a reissue, which is going to look at this at, in 10 years and say, let's reshop the market. and assume that they're healthy and assume pricing is similar. But again, it's a very nice way to add a reissue, and all of those sort of functionality also work within joint clients. So really not much else you have to learn as far as joint aside from adding the different client on there. Now, if you were doing something like this where you wanted to perhaps take a look and say, so you can see here, even in a reissued scenario, we see those renewals not quite as drastic, even on a joint life. This is very typical. The pattern sort of stays the same where our long-term products are definitely more affordable. But you can certainly, compare joint products versus other joint products. And I think that makes an excellent comparison as well. Now, that's how we add joint products for term and things we can search. Again, the system, as soon as we add the joint client, automatically knows that's what we're searching for. Because if you were adding a whole life or something from a spreadsheet through our kind of integration with the carrier software, whether it would be a UL or a whole life, even if it was a plus manual, again, because you're designing that quote in the insurance carrier software, all you would do is design a joint quote exactly to the same specifications that you're illustrating over here and drop that in through our traditional process. So that's how we can mark something as joint. The system automatically recognizes when you've added a joint client that we want to search joint rates, and you'll see it modifies over here. You can see, if I remove this client from the presentation, let's say as an example, all of a sudden our buttons down below are going to change, and we're going to have a few different extra things that we can actually utilize. So that's in a nutshell how you would do joint clients. But again, if you do have any questions around it, don't ever hesitate to reach out on our live chat. Now, this is a good opportunity with our sample client here, or with this joint client, if we had said, moving into our purchase one. And actually, I'll set up a brand new case because I want to illustrate this YRT problem that I'm talking about. So again, I'm going to create a brand new case here, and I'm going to call this, my sample client. I'm going to work off this 50-year-old male. I'll do an individual life one for this one, and I'll just show you kind of an example of what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to say we're going to look at $1 million here of insurance benefit. And I'm going to do a term search here of the products on the market. So again, I'm just going to do a term search. I'm going to use his current age of 51 here. And I see this Manulife Vitality right at the top of the list here, and RBC sort of right below it. Now, both of these products are products that would classify for this kind of YRT schedule I'm talking about on the renewal. So even calling this, a term 10, and yes, initially it's a term 10. After that, it's a YRT policy. And let's just take a look here at this policy. Now, one of the things I'm going to have to change in this report is, again, because it's just a term 10, we want to show the 10 years because most people, quite honestly, do lapse these after that 10-year point. But what we can do is, this is a good time to actually feature this time button. So you can see you're always in full control of how many years you're comparing this to. I'm just going to blast this out to age 99, and I'm going to say this client wants to look at their entire lifespan. And this is really how we, I think, position insurance really well to show how products operate over a particular client's time frame. And to me, it really is about picking particular products that fit that time frame. It may be about layering them, but it's all about how long you need the insurance for. So let's just kind of jump down into the meat of this report. Again, we first saw that that premium for 10 years. Now that I've adjusted that time frame to continue, what we can see is that from years 11 forward, and this continues, of course, until the policy expires at age nearest 80, is that we have an ever-changing renewal schedule. And, of course, this offers a couple benefits to the insurer. So I think, they have designed these plans so that it wasn't such a drastic renewal on that first one, and that it was getting returned, and that it would slowly increase as time went on. Now, one of the issues with this is that, even as we import blocks of business and mine them today, access to renewal information is always challenging. And carriers, the general position is that they don't have the information to export. It's calculated at the time of renewal. Now, whether you believe that or not, it's just simply a reality that we just don't have that data to leverage at our disposal right now. But when we think about that, it creates a huge challenge in years, 7, even if we were to, consider a swap or an exchange before year 5 here, we would want to review this policy with our policyholder. And when we sell something, we get, maybe even a paper copy of the contract, and we save it in a filing cabinet, or maybe we scan it and keep it in our document storage. It makes it really hard to leverage the information, especially if you don't keep track of every single changing premium for all these different years. Even if you think about if you've entered a plus manual on ours and you said, you know what, I want to review a term 10 policy in the future, well, it's easy to predict something that renews on 10-year schedule every single time, but something that renews each time requires a full schedule. And there we would say, use a whole life or an overfunded UL where you can paste in each different year from a spreadsheet. Now, the carriers, if anyone's ever out there actually reviewed a YRT policy, generally it actually entails a cost per thousand scan that they'll send you. You have to do some math in Excel, based on the face value to find out what the cost is year over year, and that's the best they could do. Now, we recognize that this is a current problem in the industry, and it's only going to get worse as more and more of these products actually renew on a YRT schedule. Even something like a term 30 from Empire Life now has a YRT renewal schedule. So let's say, for example, and I'm just going to add a UL into this kind of case conversation to just maybe show a classic scenario where we might use this, where we might want to leverage this information. I'm just going to add the top result here, so I'll add a Desjardins. Let's say, for instance, we present this to our client and maybe cash flow is an issue, or maybe, there's more of a retirement plan at play and they say, you know what, the permanent insurance is just not for me, even though I recognize that, this term insurance gets way more expensive way before life expectancy. I'm going to lapse the insurance, before I get to that point, maybe at 60, maybe at 65. But they say, you know what, for now, I'm just going to buy the term. Maybe I'll convert it later. So, we want to, of course, we're going to say, okay, great, we're going to sell them the product. We can't force them to go with the UL, if cash flow is an issue, even if it's against our, our better judgment or recommendation. Clients don't always pick the products we want, even if we illustrate a great reason why they should go permanent. Now, that's fine. We could probably convert that policy later, but to do that and to review it later on, we're going to need access to this full schedule to really truly show what's going to happen to this policy should this person not be healthy when they do go to maybe reapply, or again, if they can't afford the conversion in the future and just assume that, at 60 I'll just reapply again, I'll get my standard rate and we're all good. So if we want to review this policy in the future and we don't want to run into the perils of having to request a cost per thousand sheet from the carrier, one of the new features we've added in Life Design Analysis is the ability to mark a policy as sold and save all of this information to the client file. So my sample client will have a number of existing policies to it, but if, let's say, I sell a new policy to Mr. Sample Client here, I want to mark that, and I want the system to save that renewal information so that I don't have to rely on the carrier in the future. Now, to do this is really simple. All you want to do is go into Edit Plan, and this is where you'd be familiar with all of those functions to change the name, add a description, or maybe even think about linking to an e-app within here, add things like an issue date. But you'll see I can now save as a policy, and when I click that, it's actually going to give me an option for Mark as Sold. Now, if I just try and click Save as Marked and Sold right now, it's going to say we need a few critical items. We need an issue date, so we need to know when we sold this. It's going to say we sold this May 1st here. And again, we need a policy number as the second thing. I'll just go LI-47589. I'll just give it any kind of policy number here and hit Save. Now, when we do this, it saves to Life Design Analysis. Of course, every case that you do is saved, but it actually saves the policy to the client file. So let me go take a look here at Sample Client. And again, we're going to see that LI, blah, 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 blah policy that we have created here. And you can see it's got a status enforced commission paid. When we touch on account settings, I want to just show, around that status. Let's, if something changes later on around the status, we can always change that. So, if you want to say maybe it's lapsed later on and you want to change that and not get notifications on this policy, you can. Maybe it's converted. You could mark it as a conversion issued or approved. We send you notifications by default on enforced commission paid, as well as if you have no status. So if you didn't put a status in when importing, we'll still feed you ones on those. But again, it gives you a little bit of an idea. You can add certain descriptions like existing, Manulife, term, 10. So you can add additional detail as you see fit. I'll just save this information and update that file. Now, let's say, for example, a couple years down the road, our policyholder says, okay, I'm ready to convert that. I want to review that policy again. Well, in that case, again, we're going to go into LDA and we're going to say we want to create a new case. Now, to leverage any of the policies that are tied to this particular client, all we actually have to do is say we want to select a plus in force. And again, we marked this one as LI 59483938 So all we had to do is select that, and the entire renewal schedule for this particular product comes in there. And I'm just going to say, let's analyze this to age 99, and let's just take a look at the product that was brought in. So again, we just pulled it from that client file. And if you go down again, you're going to see now it's an existing policy. It's coded in red because it has that issue date. Again, it's a little more cautionary. And while no time has passed, when you actually pull this in a couple of years, because of the issue date being May 1st, 2018, it will recognize how far into this policy this is. But again, you can see that it's got all that data set. So every premium that happened post that Term 10 renewal is documented and stored. So when we think about renewal information and how important it is down the road, you're going to have a system in place already by using life design analysis to track that information, to be able to properly review it. And again, we're going to give you that solution to that data visibility problem that the insurance industry creates. But remember, to take advantage of this, as well as the sales reporting that comes in the monthly report, you've got to remember, when you do sell a policy and want to mark it and file, go to the edit plan, say mark as sold, and save to policy file. And again, remember, you can always add additional details. I know this policy is convertible till 75. I can always add that additional detail and actually say update policy. Some of those conversion details don't come in, but you can actually supplement your report with that to actually illustrate it on the report. So again, if you wanted to show something like the conversion date, we could add a nice little green date X saying like, this is the date before which you can convert this, this is when it expires. But that's going to be a great way for you to save and document all of this information on file so that you future-proof your practice, because there's nothing worse than trying to review a policy with a YRT renewal schedule when you don't have the data. And again, when these, sometimes clients get these letters 3 months before their policy actually jumps from call it 1,600 to 5,400. You want to be able to show them some options, take your time with that client, make sure they're properly educated to get that best client experience possible. So I think this is really going to help going forward. And again, if you need any assistance, make sure to ask us. So our next presenter, we actually have a member or a subscriber of Life Design Analysis. We have Ryan King on the line. Now, Ryan's from King Capital Planning out in Alberta. Ryan, why don't you tell me a little bit about your firm and how you came to find out about LDA and how you've been using it?
Sure. Thanks, Charlie. One of the things that I've always been a big believer in is helping to illustrate and with diagrams and images for folks, especially the confusing and overwhelming world of insurance. And I was one of those guys that had some Excel spreadsheets, and even now when I find them, every once in a while I trip over them in our drive system, and I just laugh. And I'm very, very thankful that it was actually Gary Harwood of IDC, the MGA, and he sat me down one time and said, I think you might be interested in this, and the connection that the MGA had with your group there, Charlie. And it's been now just over a year since I stumbled upon you, if you will. And I would even go so far to say, if I couldn't use it today in this industry, I might even second guess sticking around. It's made that much of an impact.
Well, we always love hearing that. And yeah, you're right. You joined actually January 4th of 2017, so just over a year. Anyone listening from IDC, you do receive a 15% discount, so definitely take advantage of that. Now, since joining, I know you took to the software pretty quickly, especially if you're doing these kind of things, spreadsheets. I always ask people, what did your process look like before, and what does it look like now? You mentioned tripping over spreadsheets, things like that. What sort of things were you doing manually?
Well, what I was doing manually was I was trying to take the numbers from the insurance software, putting it in at their age, and trying to prepare a presentation, thinking what the amount of insurance is that they're going to need, at least to illustrate something close to for the conversation. And but it became very problematic because I mean, the process, I guess, it evolved each time that I did it, so that was good. But then I'd even look back at the older ones that I had done and just shake my head. Thankful that I had come through that, but just every time was slightly different, and I was creating each time, and so it was a lot of time that it took and effort, and then double checking it, making sure, and it wasn't something that I felt I could leverage off to my assistant. I felt like I needed to be the one that was still doing that.
So since switching to LDA, you would definitely say you're of that 98% that increase efficiency with us. What about your results? How has it been for business? Do you find the time savings is the most important? Is it sales? Is it some other factor? Is it the presentation alone? We hear a lot of different reasons for LDA, sometimes even the policy mining. Is there one thing for you that I think that really puts everything over the top, or is it more just the kind of the ecosystem that we've built here?
Well, I think it's probably be all the above. Now that the process is much tighter, this is something that I can delegate off to my assistant to do on some of the simpler cases to prepare, and then I can roll in afterwards. So that's a massive time-saving component there. Illustrating, what is going to happen on a simple term 10 for folks, and it's amazing how fast time goes by, and all of a sudden they're getting these letters that their super cheap insurance is going up beyond what they want to pay, as most term renewals do that. And as great of a relationship as we have with folks, they often don't remember that was going to happen, or it just happened a lot sooner. So the annual or the review process that we're able to take them through now, it helps them be aware that, oh, okay, so in 2021 that's when we have to do something, but maybe we'll be proactive, review it all now, see how much insurance we need still as kids are getting older, money's in the bank, mortgage is going down, and so it's doing that as well. We've also, I think is one of my testimonials that I'd written for your group there, said that I'd done more whole life in the first 6 months of using your program than I had in the entire career thus far, which is about 15 years. So that's pretty significant. And again, it comes down to being able to, properly position this in a way that people can reference later on if they want to, with a shared link. Very simple. I don't even have to be there. They can look at it. I just get the notification, which is one of my favorite things. Somebody has viewed it, and a client has looked at the case that we've built up. Or they come back and they say, hey, you know what about if we were to increase this part or decrease that? And so it really helps educate them, because obviously, typically what we're doing is we're building a whole life permanent structure on top of the term 10 and with a term 20 or a term 30. And so without a tool like this, it just becomes a very convoluted conversation. And yet now we can say, okay, so this is this part, and these are the other two parts.
Yeah, and I think that's the big part for us, really, is that communication. I mean, the whole product was built around communicating to that end user, the actual consumer of the product. Because, we found, increasing sales was great, but as a result of doing it because your client is more educated and more informed on what they're purchasing, was really a truly win-win. Touching on that point, can you take us through, what a typical process looks like for you? So I know you're a very detail-oriented guy and you have processes. I thought it might be helpful for everyone on the webinar to see Ryan and his process for, how to review an insurance policy. So a little bit more of a third party. So take us through what a typical insurance review looks like for you. And talk to us a little bit about, sort of how you set up cases and a few of your favorite points. You mentioned a little bit about the shared case, how you like the analytics, sort of the business intelligence aspect of that. Let's take a walk through and see what a client review looks like for Ryan.
Sure. On top of that too, I'm just going to jump back. The ability for us to do this remotely now has been a real game changer. We're also licensed for insurance in Northwest Territories, and yet I've never been there. And so whether it's a review or whether it's establishing new insurance with carriers that allow us to do this, it's just been very, very significant. And that led me also in a transition, I guess, evolution in the business. We used to get folks that would call in, and sometimes we'd find out where they connected with us, and other times we wouldn't. But my objective was usually, hey, let's try and get a meeting. Okay, so if they're kicking tires and they just want numbers, I don't want to do that, right? For whatever reason. But I've switched that up a little bit, and I've thought this, probably largely with this tool, I can properly go through a bunch of options for them without even having to leave my chair. And we've covered ourselves with the needs analysis that we do, if there's a replacement of insurance, and certainly that has been, I think, an evolution for your group as well. As now we can even pack that all into the actual case that we've built up for them, and have it all sitting there right there on Life Design analysis for either future reference or immediate reference. And so just a quick high five to you on that, because it's really changed not only clients, but potential clients. And so anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is I can't say enough good things about what you guys are doing.
Fantastic. Well, you'll love the direction when we're trying to incorporate with more e-apps to make that even more seamless, and again, instantly connect back into that in-force policy mining.
Yeah.
And yeah, no shortage of accolades you can send our way here, especially when it's on recording.
There you go. So I don't know what you can see on my screen right now, but this is one of the workflows that we use for helping to visualize for folks a review process of their insurance. So we have 3 easy steps to review life insurance, and we'll utilize this if it's a policy that we've done. But I also, I'm pretty adamant of using it when we take over a policy through an agent of record letter. For whatever reason, the agent isn't there anymore. I want to go through and help them understand what it is that they actually signed up for, because I know almost without a doubt they have not seen their policy details within Life Design, and therefore I wonder if they actually know what they have. So what we've done is the clients are involved on the yellow components in here, and so I'll prepare what their current policy looks like. So in this scenario, we'll pretend it's somebody that we met years back. We did a term 10 policy, and it's time to review, just to make sure that they're either aware that the premiums are going to change, or be reminded of it, or it's just a way to do our job and generate some additional revenue in doing so. So we'll send them the link, and they'll have a chance to look at their current policy. Sometimes this is right face-to-face, but I still like to show them the overview of what we're going to do. Other times, they're busy professionals. They're probably going to do this in the evening, so that's fine. I still want to know, though, that we're going down the path that I always go down with them. So they click the link, and then simply here, as the workflow illustrates, they have questions. Okay, then we'll refer back to the link. The great thing that you built in at some point there was the ability for them to make comments. So if there's confusion right there on the page, then they can comment that. If we're sitting down face to face, we'll address it. Or if we're on a phone call, we can go right to the actual location in the report and answer that. So there we go. We got questions. Now we have no questions. We go to the next part. What's really important to me is, I often encourage people that we don't have to help insurance companies make money. They're quite a profitable entity, but in doing so, we don't want to make sure that we have too much insurance, and we certainly don't want to make sure that it's too late. So the needs analysis is an excellent tool, and again, this is one of my favorite things to get a notification on that somebody has gone through it and identified how much insurance they need.
And for those watching, I don't know, this is a somewhat new feature, so I always like to mention it a few times. Ryan's referring to the ability to share the needs analysis link. So you guys can copy this out there, have your clients fill it out, and then get notified of that opportunity. I think this is important in a review of a policy. It's neat where you have it positioned here that, review, first educate them on what they first have, and then reestablish, does that face amount fit what they're still doing?
Yeah, and don't forget, it's not just for personal, for family use. It's also for business owners. So there's both sides that can be, and they're different as well. And so when you're helping folks to realize what their insurance is for, then those are the things that you can achieve, and put it into a PDF. You can send it to them. You can include the accountants on there. Um, a great feature. We don't use it every day because just it's not necessary for our segment, but is the credit to the CDA account, the capital dividend account, and that one just answers a lot of questions. So, not let's jump back to what we were talking about on this thing here, but that's those are some of the ways that we found to use it. So we have they've completed the needs analysis. I've been notified. There's no more questions on that, and so then simply what this allows me to do, look back and see, is their current policy still fitting on top of what they need? And based on that, then I'll prepare some commentary to them, and again, either in person or on the phone, or via email. And what will happen from there is we'll go through and we'll determine then if things will be left alone, fine. Then there's no necessary requirement for a change, but at least we've done the job, and I'm confident that they know what they have, and there's a history and a trail for all of us to see. Or maybe there is a need to look because there's a difference, there's a discrepancy. And what I'd like to do there is I'm just going to show you two. I'm going to jump over. Even if the insurance amount still lines up with what we originally did, what I'm a big believer in is folks need to know that there are some options in here, because I guess over the last few months here, we've had a lot of folks that are well into their retirement age, and they're getting the letters that the insurance is going from $200-300 a month to, $1,800, $2,800, whatever it may be. Bad surprises. And so the point being is I'm encouraging folks then that are not in that area in life to say, hey, we need to apply the wisdom from what I'm picking up in these conversations with others. How can we actually have your premiums dissipate and yet your coverage is always in place?
So talk to us a little bit here about what you've set up and your general kind of approach to a plan.
Sure. So I'll just use myself in here, and let's just do this quickly. I'm gonna. So what we've done here is, yeah, that's much better. So I'm just using myself here, and I've changed my birth date to make myself feel as young as I sound. And what we've done is, yeah, their current plan, and don't worry necessarily about the labels at the moment here, Plan C and Plan A. But I always like to make it very simple for them to refer back to this. Current term 10 plan. That doesn't really mean a lot, and it's hard to capture for a client. But Plan A, Plan B, Option 1, Option 2. Those are really, really simple ways for the client not to, feel silly saying, well, what about that part? Because again, this is coming at them pretty quickly. And so I've just built in a few options here. We'll generate the report. And further to your comments, if we want to share this is how simple it is. I simply click that, and then I'll drop that into an email. I'll typically, I'll just use this space in here. I'll typically, I guess I can't, but I'll just write in the email, click here, and then you can hide all the gobbledygook just behind those letters. And if you're not sure how to do that, just Google hyperlink, how to set a hyperlink in email, and I'm sure that'll help you quickly realize that. And here's an interesting thing I've been doing too. I'll set this up where there has to be some sort of urgency. And so in this case, we'll share it, but you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Client, it's only good until the middle of the month. Okay, so sometimes that helps. You require some of them to put their name down if you wish.
So that's kind of an
But
interesting thing. I've never heard of an advisor actually using it. Now we usually around promotion we call that time boxing it. So we place some urgency around maybe an extra discount or something like that by saying you must take advantage of it before a certain time. That's definitely a great way to use an expiration date. Can you tell me, have you ever used that and had someone come back and ask and say, "Oh, sorry, I procrastinated; it expired," or that works
yeah,
fairly often for you?
no, no, absolutely. Yeah. Some of these busy business owners, they it gets lost in the inbox, I believe, and when they finally get around to clicking it, boom, it's not there anymore. So I think that psychologically that's important. We want to be very accessible, but one of my favorite phrases would be, "We want to be servants, but not slaves." And I don't know, that probably is where that ties in a little bit, but it's a great feature. And on some of your previous ones, Charlie, and now I've built some workflows, but I'm not quite there instituting this yet. But I know this is where if we were doing some sort of campaigns, with social media, we might want to gather some of the people's, the visitors' information here so we can get back to them later on. And it just forces people to, to share their information, reduce the tire kickers. If they're not that serious, then they're probably not going to care about doing that. And otherwise. So here we go. We've chosen one of the 7 or 8 different color palettes that you've prepared. And in here is where we stick the reason why. So there's 3 main components of why, and for compliance, what needs to have been covered in here. And so why have it in the first place, why these premiums, and in this case, why we have selected or are suggesting Equitable Life. And yeah, so we've just put some of those summary notes in there, including what is making it compliant.
Yeah, nice. And this looks like a custom note for you. Are you cloning kind of our reason why letter? Have you kind of got your own template in there? Is that how you're doing these?
Yeah, there would be a little bit of a mix of some of the material that you've supplied, and just making it our own. I mean, obviously, in this case in here with the example we're using, there's a younger family and they are actually wanting to pay down their mortgage, and so some of those things. What we always do is on the whole life component, we'll set it so it's paid up additions, and there's never a cash call, or there's never a some of the presets or the dividends aren't being used, just because I find that that can be confusing if the dividends aren't as high as the illustration has provided, even though they're pretty low in this environment. But just the paid up edition 20 pay, there's no questions asked. The way the illustration works, the way this graph is coming up here below, that's the way it's going to be for the premiums, and they can count on that. So we have the needs analysis, and again, we've either done it with them in person or not. Now you'll see here, I've been messing around with a few different examples. See, oh, that's the other thing actually was really helpful. This, I use my own example here with different numbers or whatever. Some they're changing, but it's just it's something that I can always go to. In my cases up here, I would have myself saved as a favorite. So then, if something comes up in conversation that I wasn't planning in a meeting, we can immediately jump here, and conceptually, I can explain to them what our thoughts are and how we might set things up. And then later on, if time permits, we'll establish it for them, or if not, they'll get an email with a link and everything that we're talking about right there. So this would be, so you can already see there's a mismatch, right? Because I was changing the numbers here. So there's a need of $1 million, and this guy is pushing $2 million. So this is quite an aggressive agent, I would say here, but it's fine.
Well, I heard this other saying that timid salesmen have skinny kids. So
there you go. So we have the current plan. It's $2 million. This is just the visual, or I guess the numerical details of what the premium is going to be. And it's always nice in the first 10 years. And then the question is almost, well, is this monthly or what is this? It's like, so that we pick them off the floor from falling off their chair. And What I like to do, I'm going to come back to this second page. I just find in my own presentation mode, this one is a little bit simpler to do it this way, starting on this sheet here. So we see, okay, this is the annual premiums, how they're going to change over the year. This is a runaway train. Works very, very well at the beginning. But if you want this insurance for long term, it's going to have to kill you to keep it. So that's a problem. Another option would be to say, well, let's get this $2 million in place and keep it the same, or keep it in a way that's affordable anyway, until you're 100. But you probably don't have enough time this afternoon to convince me that you need $2 million of insurance until you're 100. So therefore, our favorite example here is this one in here, where instead of that yellow line where the premiums are the runaway train, what about if we were to do something where premiums are set for the 10 years and then they're actually going to decrease for the following 10-year period, and then at the 20th year there's no more premiums required, and yet, as you'll see on the next scroll down here, there's actually coverage in place for life. Now we go up here, we can compare, and we see, okay, paying $154 right now. We could switch it up. You'd be paying $290 and then $240. But the difference here is that after the 20-year mark, there's no more premiums required, versus up here, you're mortgaging now your house just to pay your insurance premiums. It might not be something you want to do. And again, as you're going into the scene, though, you know that probably all that they've seen, these folks, whether they're new clients or prospects or even your own clients, they've probably only seen something like this term 10. So what we like to do then is scoot down here to the insurance benefit amount. And this is just showing them that, how cool is this? We have this premium that was green above. Pay it for 20 years. But look, what's very important is we have insurance that is in place for good. And so simple explanation here is if something happens in the first 10 years of the policy being in place, there's a $2 million payout. Then it drops to $1 million, followed by the 20th year. It's still set here at $100,000. And this is the paid up edition whole life program that is chugging away and will always be in place. And again, the premiums, to really reinforce that, are no longer required after this 20th year. The secondary thing, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, was this your traditional strategy before as well with the layered strategy, or is it something that you've gone to since using LDA?
I would say that the layered strategy was simply a 10 and a 20. As you can imagine, well, actually, you, if anybody, would know how difficult it is actually to take a whole life insurance program and drop that into an Excel spreadsheet every time. I mean, I'm speaking to the master, so that's an unfair thing, but you still know the challenges associated with that, right? So it was almost an impossible task, if not fully impossible for me to do. And the worst thing was in a meeting like that, they'd say, well, what about this or what about that?
How about the guarantees?
It was an awful thing to say, because there goes my whole next day trying to prepare this, right?
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you bring up this example too. Just sharing on more a personal level, Barry Crowler, our CEO, kind of relates as, you know, he comes from the kind of the medical space working with big pharma, and he's very much like our typical consumers in that he bought a term 10 policy, didn't hear from his advisor for 10 years, got that classic renewal letter that you speak about, and it's now, you know, it's a little bit humorous to us that he now works in sort of the insurance industry here, where he wishes he was actually shown this concept about 10 years ago. So, you know, don't underestimate that layered strategy and just the education factor. You know, people don't know what they don't know, and they want to know this kind of information. They want to be shown how these plans can be structured like this.
Well, they absolutely do. And I often tell folks, I say, you know, all your friends are going to be getting these letters, or at least all your friends that we haven't been referred to are going to be getting these letters of the standard insurance. Back to this, where, oh, you know what, there's one more increase. Oh, here's another one here. Well, you know what, we gotta get rid of this insurance. It's way too much. How are we really going to pay 30 grand a year? But the pain doesn't stop there. Now it's 85. Well, my goodness, $180,000 just for insurance versus saying, isn't this neat? The premiums are going to drop to nothing. Now, in fairness, it's not the same amount of insurance, but for most folks, they don't need that $2 million until they're 100.
And you can still, I mean, depending on how you play with those paid up additions, I'm sure you can find that balance. But I agree. I think, having some sort of insurance plan goes a long way. I mean, on the other side of things, on the investment planning world, we're all about making investment plans that have an accumulation phase and then a decumulation phase. But too often, I see in the insurance world, it's one product or another instead of this hybrid approach or this blended approach where we have a plan for different stages of life where our needs are definitely changing. So, yeah, I certainly see, a big fit for the layered plan, and I certainly hear it from consumers. So, when you talk to a lot of regular people, that's sort of, they have no idea that this sort of strategy exists. So I think showing it in this way is a phenomenal way to kind of communicate that value.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's by, to support my comment earlier, this is how we've done more whole life insurance within the first 6 months of using LDA than we had my entire insurance agent career prior to that. So the real question is, why weren't you there earlier?
We were building.
Okay, that's good. Just the final one here, especially if you're newer to the LDA program, this is interesting. We don't belabor it, but we definitely pointed out, you're building an asset when you have this whole life, and there's a couple different ways to use it. And worst case scenario, at this 20th year, you say, Ryan, this was a ridiculous thing that we've done. Why did I do it? Well, you can cancel, and there's the cash values that are changing every year. And but you can see, and this is different for everybody. And so we are also big proponents of setting this up, or at least looking at this for kids. So when we have the age here, adding a child's age, just really prolongs this runway. And you'd be astonished at some of the cash values that then are building. And by the 20th year, we've seen a lot of them where it's around the 18th or 16th year is worth more than what they put in. And so the other point that's interesting in these conversations with folks, I say, hey, if your parents had done this, my parents had done this, we wouldn't be talking about these premiums anymore. We would simply be talking about it. I can't believe how much this insurance policy is worth right now.
Yeah, I love this idea. I kind of talk about it when I talk about that cascading insurance concept, and I say, it's a great thought, and I do this with my kids personally, and this is how I treat their whole life policies. I think of them as a future credit card. So I know I'm going to leverage that cash and pass on some insurance that'll still keep building. But I think about it as, sort of a top up on the RESP. RESP is a free gift, but if I think about this as their meal plan, or again, even just some inflation protection around how much I anticipate education will cost, or a post grad, I think it's an excellent idea to think about it, as a future credit card. And if something does happen, of course, you've got that insurance benefit there as well.
Well, and our tagline is guiding families and entrepreneurs on retirement, and especially the entrepreneur folks that we're working with, it's interesting for them to look and see, oh, well, if we pay this in for our kids, who knows? They're 2 or 3. What are they going to do in 20, 25 years? Well, they probably will, chances are one of them is going to want to start a business. And, so if they haven't jumped onto your credit card idea, there's some cash in here to be able to go to Bank of Montreal that has a great relationship, in this case with this particular carrier, and the financing is arranged at a very, very reasonable rate, and off we go. Now, as we explain this though now to folks, it really, we can go back here and it all makes a lot more sense. They realize, oh, okay, yeah, so we don't want this. We don't want to be paying $900 and we're not, it stops here kind of a thing, right? Or maybe here, but this is all of a sudden now much more interesting and compelling that it's going to be decreasing in time versus this runaway train. And so this really becomes the summary for them. And, it's amazing all of a sudden, that they can find $300 when they weren't sure if they could find $150 a month, right? Because they see what they're paying for, they get it, they understand it, they see the future values, and it just all makes a lot more sense to them that they're going to have something at the end of it.
Fantastic. And that's, again, I mentioned it a little bit before, but that's really our key focus is, we know we can help increase sales for you. We do that through communication. For us, it's all about helping kind of the end user. And we know by facilitating that education, these products are going to sell themselves. But I always say, they're actuarially designed to be better products the more you pay for them. It's just when do you want to, how do you want to structure that? Do you want to climb the mountain early when you're young, or do you want to do that later when you're older? And again, so many people get surprised by, sort of the term policy out there that does creep up, and they're just, too old to convert. So I think the more you can show someone a layered strategy, find that budget. If they don't have the budget for full paid up additions, do an enhanced with a layer. I mean, there's so many different ways we can fit these and cater these to our client's budget, but provide a lot more value. I think, again, by giving them options, we're going to show them that. And it's kind of a good segue to say that, if you haven't done so already, we do have a really neat blog post on the psychology of choice in the insurance buying process. And it talks about, sort of these different options and a little bit of what the consumer is thinking about when presented by, something they think is confusing. They'll almost turn off and take no action because of the opportunity cost. So I really like your idea of simplifying it as well, taking away naming altogether and just saying, it's option A, B, C. It could be a good, better, best, silver, gold, platinum solution. But, I think it's a great way to structure a case. And if you're looking to increase whole life sales and protect your clients more, I think, incorporating a layered strategy is fantastic. Even if you do it as a cascading one, really effective strategy for your kids.
Yeah, and I think that, your group has been very, very successful at helping us learn as agents. And so I often, at the beginning when I connected with you folks, I was quite baffled actually as why, why you're helping the industry so much. And so, extremely appreciative, but still a little bit baffled because, you could argue that an insurance company should be doing stuff like this. But anyway, that aside, as I've gotten familiar with the program, any one of your great teammates there, never made me feel like I had a silly question, even though I asked quite a few, and I really wanted to learn this. And what you can do if you're not sure the whole life, you take these illustrations, you drop it in, and they'll show you how to do this. But it's going to help you understand what the different options of whole life actually mean in real life. The 20-page illustration PDF that comes from the insurance software is one way of doing it, but this is certainly another way that us as agents can become far more familiar, confident, knowledgeable, and able to explain this.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for being here. Now, before I let you go, I just had one other question. You mentioned you had filled up our feedback archive almost to capacity. Tell us a little bit. I don't know if you've had a chance yet for the people. We're going to cover it in a later topic on document storage, but have you been able to use our document storage, and how do you kind of have your roadmap in there? Have you been adding those sort of things via, link in your presentations? How have you been adding supplemental documents into your presentations, and have you been able to use that document storage yet?
Mm-hmm. So the what you're referring to is just found here. I pulled it up on the screen here. I'm sure you can see it now. But one of the things that I'd far rather do is proper notes right now versus trying to remember what we talked about later on, and obviously that's not compliant and yada yada, but it's just makes it for a really difficult afternoon to try and remember some of these things. So the ability to use this program now and just put everything that is related to this case in here is absolutely a game changer. And so what you'll see here is we would reference here the life insurance replacement declaration forms, pop them right in here. So they're signed, they're right in here. And so the roadmap that I showed you on that previous screen, that one was for client facing, but what we've done is I have probably another 5-6 steps on the one that is just related to us, where we need to see all the moving parts, including being able to go in here and actually mark that this is a policy and mark that it is sold. And so the statistics that come out from your group on a monthly basis, it's kind of a fun game. We're trying to see how much we can improve our numbers every month. This is different than our normal CRM, but this has just been a really neat tool. Again, put it all in there, hit save. You'd have a policy number up in here, whatever it is, with the issue date, and that becomes a real reservoir of information. And I'll tell you, I bet you if down the road I went to sell our block of insurance business, we'd be able to fetch far more for it if we had the information stored like this to the potential buyer, where they can see, oh, interesting. So all your cases, this is the process. You've marked as sold all these policies for the last 15, 20, 30 years. That we understand what we're buying and would get top dollar.
Fantastic. Great point. And all the supporting documentation. Well, I know we're out of time today, so I want to thank you again for participating in our webinar. Really appreciate you taking the time to show us your process. And I just want to comment, anyone else looking to be featured on the webinar, if you have a different idea, I'd love to hear your thoughts and see if there's anything we can do. But Ryan, again, thank you so much for your time, and wishing you the best going forward and continued success using LDA. I think you'll really love some of the new things we have coming out. I mentioned trying to get you to, do more business from home with incorporating with things like e-apps. So I really think you'll like what we have coming up. Now, I know we're running short on time, but I do want to touch base on our last topic, and that's going to be the account setting. So I wanted to refresh with some of the new features that we've added, to make sure that we go into our account settings and customize them to reflect that. And again, if you are watching this for the first time, again, we do have a very basic kind of introductory tutorial video that can be found from the main dashboard that it's called How to Create Your First Report. But one of the things I often tell people when they sign up for Life Design Analysis is go into the account settings here and customize the account as your first step, because all reports going forward are going to use the settings from your profile to really drive your preferences, but as well as the branding. So you'll see there's a couple different tabs across the top. There's Cases, System, Dropbox, and of course Life Guide. And I mentioned it before, again, our Life Guide subscribers do get that 50% discount. And that's so all of those rates can be fed into our system, making it that much easier to present those options to your clients. So it really is a great combination of how we work together with Life Guide. Now, again, touching base on some of the basics, if you haven't done so already, make sure you have your logo in there. To simply select your logo, just say choose file. It will launch your file browser, and you can select from any sort of logo file. Again, you can do things like customize the color scheme, so choose different color schemes. You can customize different templates to give a different layout or look and feel of the report. And do things like, change your company name. Now, things like the presented by name, when you do make changes to those, again, they are sent to our team. So just remember, the LDA is a per advisor license. We design it so it's affordable, so one advisor, one license. But again, encourage you to customize things like the mission statement. This might relate to your brand or your particular practice, your niche market. We always recommend having a strong disclaimer. Now, remember, there are things like, your information. This populates the last page of the report. But again, if you find, since we've added new, kind of new metrics in there that, maybe you want to include those in every report. Remember, if you have a set favorite report components, you can change them on a per case basis, but you can also change them from a global account setting. So within this account settings area, you can customize what your default pages are. So if you find you're unchecking a certain component like cost per thousand or something like that on each case, or you say, I want that in every case, all you have to do is set it here. Of course, it doesn't mean in that particular case you can't uncheck it, but it should make it a little easier to set up some of these cases, especially when you're running recipes or some of that block automation is running. It'll run based on these case settings. Now, the other thing, again, when we get to actually talking about the system and some of that automation, there are, so everything to do with the report is found in cases. Everything to do with the system is found in the system tab. So things that this would entail would be like, how often do you want to receive notifications? Now, if you're going in here daily, you might not not want that email that fires at 7 a.m. to say, there's unread notifications. If you're coming in here every day, you're going to see them anyway if you're checking that and staying on top of that. If you log in less frequently, again, you may want the daily reminder. So when when someone looks at that shared case, and if you're not coming in here every day, it's going to notify you as soon as you haven't viewed those notifications. But again, of course, we give you control, so you can change them to maybe weekly notifications or never. But again, these sort of notifications are on things like birthdays of clients, and we notify you a day before so you have a little bit of time to react. We notify you of client case visits and conversion opportunities, even when a client fills out that public needs analysis. So again, if you're not familiar and watching for the first time, you can link someone to a needs analysis, have them fill it out. We're going to tell you when they've completed it. And again, there's custom notifications in there too, things that we would remind you about. Now, things like the monthly report, do you want to receive it or not? These are things like how you're trending as far as cases created, product mix, and as you start marking policies as sold, you're going to see in that monthly report you receive that it's going to tell you if you've sold more or less cases in the month. And, when we think about some of that automation, like those case opportunities, well, we added a feature that, when a Term 10 opportunity comes up, since again, you already have the client created in Life Design Analysis with all of their information, we can run you a report based on that policy opportunity. Now, of course, in the sake of customization, we like to give you full control over what recipe runs, or maybe you don't want anything to run and you can select no recipe. You can see I have mine when a Term 10 conversion opportunity comes up. I want to run a brand new Term 10, so a replacement. I want to add a T20 to that, but I also want to show them what a potential conversion could look like. So I add a min-funded UL. But again, you can control these, for exchanges. I want to show them a new T10 or versus a T20 and the benefits of a T20. And for the T20, again, I want to show them somewhat of a conversion. Now, I touched a little bit about policy statuses as well. You can select which ones you receive notification on. So if you like using active or approved, or you have a different one that you want to get notifications on, so maybe it's conversions. You say, I'm marking a lot of them as converted, and I want notifications on those. Again, you simply check off the ones that are going to run for the filter. And the reason we added this is, sometimes you're going to see, when you sync your back office, for instance, with LDA, you might see some of those policies that have been lapsed, but you don't want notifications. But, you do want the client detail to know that they had that policy with you. That's why we've added kind of this filter around what you get notifications on. And you can also, say what you'd like to see in that client grid. So if you wanted to see, you're lapsed in that client grid, you could actually add that to your system to give a little bit more customizability over, what you see in that client management. And of course, if you want to customize your survey settings, when you do integrate with those Life Guide rates, these might be things like your payment schedule, monthly versus annually, company filters, things like that, and even, of course, your preferred companies. Again, this just makes it a little easier to run a recipe a lot of the times by picking carriers you're provided with. Of course, you can still do the full survey, and consumers really like that too, because if they've gone online to check some of these things, again, it's nice showing that validated there. So that's a little bit of a recap on some of the new features or some of the controls that you can actually customize within the system. Just closing, I know we're over time this month, so I apologize, but hopefully you've gained a lot from the webinar. As far as housekeepings and updates, really mark policies as sold. So some of that sales data that we want to give you and show you how you're trending is something that's new. Document storage is something that you saw Ryan touch base on a little bit there. We've added document storage so that in any case, when you do sell the policy and want to upload a copy of the contract or want to upload your reason why letter and keep it with your suitability analysis, it's a little easier to keep external documents. Was at a meeting with an advisor last week, again, saying they use Evernote for these sort of documents so that the client can sign them. Remember, you can keep links and things like that with your product. So again, you may make a report note and add a custom link to some of those files as well. So lots of different ways you can tie those compliance documents together, but file storage is certainly going to help you keep things like maybe a scanned copy of the contract with the actual client file, with the case that you created. And again, it should make it that much tidier from a compliance perspective, keeping everything in one spot, needs analysis, suitability analysis, reason why letter, and that whole proposal stored with your client, accessible from anywhere. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. If you have any feedback for us, always welcome. And if you'd like to be featured or you have an idea for a future webinar topic, please send it to us over our live chat or info@lifedesignanalysis.com. So thank you again for joining. Take care.